Do Native people have like a first name and a last name?
Yeah.
They do.
Well, not all of them. You know, yeah, they would have because they named their kids something else. You know,
But
so
traditionally,
yeah,
in the past, they
yeah,
had
I
first
think
name
so.
and
Yeah,
last name.
because they named their kids something. You know,
Yeah,
it had to be two. You know,
yeah.
yeah. The girls after the ma, and you know, that. Yeah.
Are we good?
Oh, yeah.
So, Ron, you're a Native American.
Yeah, part. Yeah.
Can you please talk about the tribe that you are descended
Well, I'm originally in my heritage is Mackinac band, but they haven't been recognized by the federal government yet. So I was adopted into the Ojibwe band, you know, which I belong to now, you know, and yeah, but I never could figure out why the Mackinac band wasn't recognized, the biggest band up there. Why wouldn't it be recognized, you know? But anyway, that's political, you know. So that's. But actually, I'm a member. My heritage is in the Mackinac band, you know. Yeah.
And did you grow up your whole life with an awareness of your?
Oh yeah. People remind you every day in school. It was quite cruel, you know. Then I was put in Indian homeschool, you know, and that I didn't like at all. But I ended up having friends and everything, but most people, like if I wanted to date, their mother and dad wouldn't let her date an Indian, you know. That was before. It's not as bad now, but it was bad then, you know. So, but I learned real fast. But I was stubborn. I wasn't going to claim I was anything else, you know. And I figure I honor all my. I got actually a tiny bit of German in me, and French and Indian, you know, and I appreciate all of it, you know. You got.
I was going to ask you because you said that in school people always reminded you, and it was.
Well, they were taught by their parents to don't go near the Indians. You know, they're not nice people, whatever. You know, and that was a bad thing. And I had people that I went to high school with that come in and actually apologize to me later on. You know, and I accepted it. You know, but when you teach a little kid from this high up, it's not their fault. But after they can learn how to reason, it is their fault. You know, so, but that's the way it was. You know, just like blacks and whites. You know, you got like when I taught classes, I invite the non-Indian and the Indian in my classes, and we talk about culture. You know, and sometimes it gets out of the way of the actual art we're doing, but you got to learn to appreciate yourself and be nice to other people, respect things, you know, and that's what I teach anytime I get a chance, you know.
Why is it important for kids to understand their heritage and their culture?
Well, I think for one real good reason, so if somebody's making fun of them, they're going to ask their parents why, you know.
Let me stop you right there. I just want to say that nobody will hear my question. So if you could say one reason that it's important to know your culture is so.
Well, I think it's very important to know your culture, and now mixed bloods. Sometimes a man or a woman can have only a quarter Indian and it don't show, you know, but it's there, you know. So, and but I think I taught my kid. See, my first wife passed away. She was full-blooded, and my son is darn near full Indian, you know. And I taught him right away to be proud of his heritage, you know. And right now he's got a son that's about 3/4 Indian, you know. You teach him that, you know. But before, the parents would not want to tell them too much because if they could get away with not admitting they're Indian, they'd have less problem, you know. But now it's sort of getting a little better, you know.
Why did you never, because you if you didn't tell me you were Native American, I wouldn't know.
No,
You could be Italian, you could be anything.
yeah, or half French or whatever, you know.
So why did you never take the easy way and not say?
I was stubborn, you know, and I was proud of myself, and I didn't care what the hell everybody else thought of, you know. But my twin brother, now I got a twin, he was pure white with blonde hair. You wouldn't even know we were brothers. You know, the French, German showed on him, you know, more than the Indian, you know. But no, it's getting a little better now, but a lot of nationalities in our heritage that we got, and it's all mixed, you know. They got, but I taught right away that to be proud of, I taught my son to be proud of his Indian, you know. And
why is it important to be proud and to know about your culture?
well, you should have a little self-esteem, you know. You shouldn't be dragged down all the time to, I better not tell them I'm Indian or they'll make fun of me or whatever, you know. And I think you should be proud. I'm proud of all the nationality I got, you know. And I've had a lot of friends that are black, and yellow, whatever, you know. And that's the way I believe. And you have less problem in this world if everybody think that way and act that way, I think, you know. Because I don't think a little child should be abused because he or she's an Indian or a black or whatever, you know. That's not right, you know. And but that's, you know. But my son and my grandson, if you look at them, they're no doubt Indian, you know, because both parents had it, you know. No, you got to be proud of what. Just like when I teach my classes, and somebody else has parents and grandparents that did another craft, I'm interested in that, you know. We talk about it, you know. And
tell me about your career as a teacher. What is it that you teach?
well, I'm not an academic. I learned that really quick. Everybody should know you're born with whatever you got, you know. And I'm not an academic, so I had to make up my mind in life that I'm not going to be a professor, teacher, or anything, because I had trouble getting D minuses, for Christ's sakes, you know. So I knew I had to go into the field of whatever I was capable of. I was very strong, so I went into the trades, you know. And now the craft, I've always messed around with stuff like that, you know. And the first time I ever carved anything was when I was about 11. My twin brother and I made some decoys. We had black and white paint, so that's what their color was. But from there on, I always carved something, you know. And I've been teaching classes for about over 30 years now, you know. And like I said, I invite both Indian or non-Indian into my classes, you know. I think it's good for the mingling, you know. And you'd be surprised how they'll come up and say, my God, I didn't know all this until we started, you know. And but I believe in that.
And it's certainly as important as it is for Indian kids to understand their heritage, it's so important for non-native kids to understand.
Yeah. You know, and I think they should be taught to respect each other, which parents didn't do for a long time, you know. You got to respect each other, you know. Think how this world would be if everybody respected each other, you know.
Do you think when a kid is bullied, let's say, because they're different, that makes them ashamed?
Makes them angry. Of course, my advantage at that time, which was bad, but it ended up being good, is I could handle myself. You know, people would pick fights, and they were damn sorry they did too, you know. And so I stopped a lot of it. But then when I got in high school, I was first string on all the sports. So I got to know all the other people that were in there, you know. We got to be friends, you know. And so, no, I think it's important to be taught that from a little kid. And like I said, when it wasn't being taught, that's where people would grow up to figure that somebody else wasn't as good as they were.
If you could say that again, I think it's important to be taught what from a little kid? If you could explain.
Well, manners and be polite.
If you could say the whole thing, I
And
think it's important.
taught manners and to be polite, and you know, in that aspect, and be proud of yourself. Don't be ashamed of what you're taught that you're. Don't tell them you're Indian, for Christ's sake. You know, that should be all, or you know, all shouldn't be no more. You know, and you got.
So, what is it that you teach exactly?
Well, I do a lot in bark work, birch bark. I teach the canoe building. I teach. That's how I met Adam. That he was here. I met him when I taught a class in his hometown on quill work, porcupine quill work boxes. That's how I met him and his girlfriend. And anything to do with bark or Indian craft, you know. I don't like beadwork. I tried that, so I don't teach that. But my stuff comes all out of the woods, you know. And like Adam will come up this spring, you know, and him and I will cover miles and miles of country looking for bark and stuff, you know. So, but I pretty well teach what the Indians used to make years ago, you know. My favorite is canoe building, you know. And I taught myself how to do that. But I seen so many people like me that didn't have a academic background or go through life just terrible when they didn't accept it or tried to do better. You know, I mean, let's face it, your IQ tells you what your capabilities are. You can't make me from a D- to an A because I'm not there, you know, and that's what the mistake they make, you know. And so what I'm trying to say is, if I go through high school, I didn't graduate because I had to get out and work, make a living, but you go through high school with D-. Oh my God, I graduated from high school. Well, what the heck good is a D-? What are you going to be? You know, you sure in heck ain't going to be a professor or anything like that, you know. No, you're born with it, but it's up to you to make it good, you know. And so I learned that at a young age. I said, I'm not going to be this or that. I got to look for something else, you know. So I used my hands, you know. And but, oh my God, you didn't graduate from high school? You know, and they don't get it, you know. But that's somebody with a high IQ can't figure it out, you know. It's called common sense, you know. You got.
Let me ask you something. So you taught yourself how to make canoes.
Yeah.
Somebody must have taught you.
Well, you do find books, you know, and you read about this and that, you know, but your actual, I can tell you how to fillet a fish for a week, but I got to show you when you got the knife in your hand and you're doing it, you know. And that's the way this is, you know. You can't just tell somebody about it. But I figured it out. Like bark is bark. I know what a birch tree looks like, you know. And but it was quite an experience. How I started building, I was working at a museum in St. Ignace. They wanted me to do a project, so and I'd prolong doing it all summer. So, why don't you build a birch bark canoe? I said, I don't know how to build, you know. So I had to hurry up and look it up. And that one I did the old way, with an axe and a draw knife and that, you know. And if you look at it, you're probably saying it's probably 200 years old, but whoever did it don't know what they were doing. They got it in the museum yet, you know. And the second one I built was with my brother-in-law. Him and I built one, that's in there too. But that's how I got started, you know.
And I don't know if I asked you this. Did you grow up in a family that was encouraging you to learn?
No. I was given up by my parents when I was 2. went with my aunt, then I was given up there, and I've been on my own since I was just before ninth grade. You know, I slept in cars, I slept on fish tugs, and but I survived. And no, now I forgot what you said.
Well, I'm just wondering, where is the source of your interest in the craft?
Well, I just looked at things and I said, boy, it'd be pretty neat. Now, I said, my God, how did they do that? And what I always think about is the first one that ever thought of this. Who taught them? Nobody. I think that's where the IQ deal comes in. I might not have an IQ for math or science or anything, but I have IQ for something homemade, And if you had to grade me on this, you'd give me an A+, But they don't teach that in school, So, but I think that should be, let's not try to make this D- school, kid just to get through school. What good is that diploma with D-? What the heck good is it? You're going to hire me, you're going to ask me what my education was and what my knowledge is and what my grades were, And
Well, I'll tell you what, if there was ever a catastrophe, I'd rather be in the woods with you trying
yeah,
to survive
yeah, it does. Yeah.
than somebody that has, a diploma. But let me ask you this. So I think that's fascinating that you taught yourself by just thinking.
Yeah,
someone
looking at it, and taking advice from other people, And yeah, it's no, it's I think it's fascinating and I always think of who was the first person that ever thought of this? Who taught them? Nobody, But there could have been 2, 3 of them in on it, and they figured it out, Yeah.
Can you talk about the construction of the teaching lodge? How you did it, why you chose the materials, how did
Well, we knew, and even back then they knew it had to be made out of hardwood, and it's common sense, Then we got to remember what type of bark we got available to us. Elm bark is better, but we don't have much of it up there, but as you're building it, you can see, okay, here, I think that's what they had to do, or it made common sense. If it's going to fall apart and you fixed it like this, that's the way it should go, And I built lots of little huts for museums and all over the place, Yeah, most of them are like sweat lodges, They got, but I think it's pretty neat how any nationality figured things out, Yeah, but there's, and it's not everybody can learn this because I had one of my students. She could do quill work. Her work was just superb. But we was doing black ash baskets in the class. She couldn't learn it. No way could that girl figure that out. We finally had to give up, And she couldn't figure it out, And she had an IQ that was way up there, But she could not figure that out, But her quill work was superb. She wasn't Indian. She was not an Indian person, but we're very good friends to this day. But and she tried 2 different classes on the black ash baskets. And, my aunt showed me how to do that. I was taught from her, to do the black ash baskets. And what marvels me and kind of teased me off is big hampers about this tall. Back when my aunt was doing that, she'd get $2 for that. That was really generous, $2 for a big panther, And but I brought classes right out in the woods. We gathered the materials, then we processed the splints, then we did the basket, But I'd bring my classes out when I worked at the museum. You got, I enjoy teaching, you know, and but I'm gonna keep working till I'm gone, because I see so many people my age. I'm just a few months from being 80. My age they're out of it. They ain't got no physical ability, nothing. They graduate or retire, you know, and they start drinking or whatever. And as long as I can use my hands and keep my mind straight, and that both helps, you know, I'm going to do it, you know, so.
How does it feel when you make something in the way that your ancestors did? You figured it out. You went into the woods, you gathered
Yeah.
material, and then it's in a museum. How does that make you feel?
It makes you feel pretty good, you know. There's a lot of my stuff is all over the place, you know. Well, look at this place I built, made quite a few things for it, you know. You got, but yeah, it's like anybody else that builds a house or becomes a professor or whatever in their lifetime. They should be proud of it, you know. You got,
Why is it important for young people to come to this museum in July when it opens up and look at that lodge and learn about the original people? Why is that important?
well, it's important for both non-Indian or Indian, you know, just like if I came to this museum, which I will, I want to go look at the logging aspect they've shown and other things that progressed as man got together and made it, you know. And I think museums are pretty cool, you know, if they're done right. You know, most of them are, you know, but most of them have the problem of not having the money to do it, you know. And like most of them, they'll start out and they can only do so much, you know. But my job at the museum, I'd work on things too, but my job was being an interpreter. You know, I talked to all thousands of tourists through all these years, you know. And when I retired or got out of there, for 3-4 years later, they'd say, everybody come in and say, "Where's Ron?" You know, because I talked to him, you know, the year before or 5 years ago, you know, so.
What were you interpreting?
And I interpreted what went on, and, you know, both in the aspect of making things in their beliefs. And they had a lot of questions, you know, and I only had a little bit of trouble with a few people, the ones that weren't taught to be, you know, and I just politely asked them to leave, you know, and I told a couple of them, I said, I hope you aren't teaching your kids like you're acting. You know, that's what's wrong with this world right now. Please leave, you know. But most of the time, everybody was pretty curious and wanted to know everything about things, you know. Because in our museum Indian wasn't the only aspect in there, you know, just like this one, you know. And I think that's good, you know. But it all got kind of started bad, you know. Like when I first told you about being in Indian homeschool. One thing I did do about this whole deal is I wrote a book. I didn't write it, I dictated it to a professor friend of mine. And it's called Not First in Nobody's Heart. And I told my life story in there, you know. And I said, I'll straighten a few of these things out, you know. And went through 3 copies of, you know, we're going to do another one, but I want to add a chapter to it. And I did lectures in universities and colleges and all over when it first came out, you know. When I did lectures, you can't believe how people weren't taught things. And here you could have a person with a 200 IQ and he or she might be dumber than a toad about everything else, you know. And it was unreal when I'd do these lectures, you know. And but it all went well, you know.
Well, what you have to offer is very important, and not a lot of people know.
No, they're not taught it, you know. And yet,
When you say things started out bad, Are you talking about the way this country viewed Native people?
Well, yeah, that too, with the blacks, and the two most people had problem with that in their nationality was the blacks and the Indian. Well, the Chinese didn't do so well either. But it's and when you start a country out like that, it takes a lot of years to get it straightened around. And but what I look at right now today, I know the blacks had a lot of problems, but when I tell you this, you watch for it. All you see on commercials now is black and white. You would think that was the only two people in the damn world, That's all you see. And it's a shame that several blacks had to get killed before this started, Well, several thousand Indians got killed long before that, but I mean, it's how it's done,
What did you mean when you said when you start a country like that?
Well, when you start out doing things wrong and it's not corrected, it's going to stay wrong, When they came over here and put Indians on reservations and killed people to get the land and all that, and why would you have to do that, And just like what's going on in Russia right now. I mean, it's war when you kill children and pregnant women and men. Is that war? And they're gonna all this political baloney. They'll what should we do? Well, do it.
I know.
And this guy is nuts. But the worst part of it is people follow him. And you got to stop this. And what a mess.
It's terrible, terrible. About the Native people, do you feel, can you talk about this? Is the situation getting better with understanding, interest in...
Well, I think so. Not all over. And you'll never get everybody to conceive knowledge enough or accept it enough to be all right by it, But from being a kid and up to my age now, I can see a lot of difference. When I was a kid, there's no way a kid should be raised that way, And when I looked at everything, when I was in reform schools, Indian home schools, jails, mental institutions, prisons. I had, at that time, a third of my life I was locked up.
Why?
Well, I was angry, And now if I would have weighed 230 pounds and somebody's making fun of me, they probably wouldn't. I only weighed 130 pounds. So I'd fight my way, And I just got all messed up. So I got punished for what I did. And rather than cry about it all my life, I decided, well, I won't drop all that, but I'll try to do better. And I did. Just like my education, I said, I'm not going to be a professor no matter how long I go to school. I got to work with my hands. But I also got to use my brain for something else too.
What you said is so important.
Yeah.
I would ask you if you could please say it again so I can use it. If you could say, in my lifetime, things have really changed where people treat Native Americans better, something like that.
Yeah.
If you could say
Well,
that.
I can see where it still goes on, but I can see a good improvement in it, And it probably takes people like me or somebody else, something happens where they should have did this and they realize they didn't. People start changing and looking at the aspect and putting some common sense to it. And the one thing I'll say right off, I think the biggest class they should have in school is a class on common sense. That should be mandatory, And I've seen guys with IQs sticking out of their ears and they're dumber than a toad about everything else, And but it's up to the parents to transfer it all over to their children to their friends, and on up the line. And pretty soon people. And then I always ask a lot of people, how would you feel if you were treated like that? You know, and but you know, I just took it, and I wrote a story on it, and then I teach it. You know, that's all. I think that's the way it should be. You know.
What do you wish for young kids who are Native American? What do you want them? How do you want their experience to be?
Well, I want them to learn that it's not bad to be a Native American. You got to have self-esteem. And if you don't have self-esteem and respect yourself, how the hell are you going to learn anything else? You know, you teach them, and then also teach them to respect other nationalities or other people, regardless of nationality. I think nationalities, you're going to notice it, but I think the heck with nationalities, just teach each other equal and all right, you know.
Why is it important for a young child who is a descendant of Native Americans to meet someone like you or to learn from someone like you?
Well, I think that's why I always said if I can pass it on, I'll do it every time, you know. And but I'm mixed blood, you know, and it's that wasn't my fault, you know. But I think I'm proud I got a tiny bit of German in me, and French and Indian. I'm proud of all of it, you know. I'm proud of myself, and you got to be proud of yourself. That's called self-esteem before you can get anywhere, you know. But if you're getting knocked down, get back up, you know. And I meet my high school people today in grade school when they used to make fun of me, you know. Apologize for it, you know. I accept it, you know. But but I made a lot of mistakes in my life. I was an angry young man for years, you know. And my real problem was I drank too much, you know. I lose my reasoning when I get drunk, you know. And I ended up, like I said, in prison. But I had to do them twice before I learned, you know. I did everything twice, you know. And but like I said, I could have cried over spilled milk all the time, but I said, well, just always remember not to pull this crap again, you know. And just, you got to remember it, because if you forget it, you're going to repeat it, you know. And but
it's great that you have grown into somebody who's doing something so important.
yeah, it's
Can you talk about the teaching lodge? What was it used for? What did they do with that? And start by saying the teaching lodge.
well, they had their ceremonies in there too, you know. And I don't know who gave it the name Teaching Lodge, you know. But that's what they did in there. They showed their heritage, is all I can really say about it, because that's the way I think it went, you know. And, well, just like if there was a sweat lodge there, of course a child's going to ask, what is that, you know. I'd think as a little kid it was a playhouse, you know. But their parents taught them this was that, you know. Not all people did it, you know, but I think the key to the whole thing is to be a nice person. If you're a nice person, you're not going to be ignorant to anybody with black, Indian, Chinese, or white. If you're a nice person, you're not going to do that. And that hasn't been completely overhauled yet in this world. It probably never will, you know. Just like what's happening in Russia. Look at that.
I know, terrible.
What bothers me is people follow this idiot, you know. And but anyway, it's I think if you leave less politics out of everything and teach them common sense, you're going to get someplace, you know. Politics is always reversal of someone else or whatever, you know. I believe that I'm not Democrat or Republican. You know why? I want to be my own person. And I meet hundreds of people through my lifetime that are Democrats because that's what their parents were, or Republican. Why? You know, you got to be able to think for yourself, for crying out loud, you know. And but I'm neither one, you know. And so I can't can't take credit for who's in there because I probably didn't vote for them, you know. But I do vote, you know. But and then when you're incarcerated like I was, you never had the right to vote in that whole period, you know, of time and parole. Until that was over with, then you had the right to vote, you know.
Your hat is very beautiful. Is that a native hat?
I don't know if it was or not, but it looked like one to me. It was in an antique store, you know, and I bought it about 30 years ago, you know. And, but yeah, it's. I think if everybody would just stop and reason, and that covers common sense, you know. And but in my day, as far as education went, you're going to figure out right away that I'm not going to be a professor. I think they should have been teaching trades in the schools right from the start, you know, and that's how I learned. I got on construction, and you know.
Speaking of that, you said you have other things in this museum that you made. What else did you make that's going to be shown?
Oh, I made like cradle board and the canoe, and oh God, a dice game the Indians had. I don't know, about 10, 12 things that'll be in there, you know, that I made.
What's a cradle board?
To where they put babies, you know. And, yeah, I got. I made quite a few things for them.
How long have you been doing that?
I've been doing that. Oh God.
How long have you been making things out of nature?
Probably since I was a young teenager, you know. I started out with the decoys, you know, and I carve, right now I carve antler too. I'll make a knife, and the handle will be an antler, and I'll carve an eagle head on it, and you know, and stuff like that. And I make ricing stuff for people actually use it, you know, out of bark, you know. And how you figure out bark is ready is when the leaves come out on a tree, and get some warmer weather with that, the bark will strip, because it don't strip all year, you know. Then you can go out earlier, like what they call winter bark, but it's not in the winter. It's late, early spring. And that bark, when you take it off, you can etch, you know, and do etchings on it, you know. So I do it both seasons, you know. But it's, you learn that by experience too, you know. Just like when I first learned how to lay block and brick. We were doing a job in St. Ignace, and I was tending. When they went to dinner, I laid this whole course of brick on the walls, on there, you know. When the boss came back, he said, "Who did that?" As I did. "When are you going to hire me as a mason?" You know. He said, "Well, it won't be on this job, but you come down to Luddy's, and I'll put you on a wall." You know, so that's how I started. I didn't go through no apprenticeship or anything, you know.
So you're completely self-taught?
Yeah. You got, well, when I welded, I taught myself how to weld, you know, and I got, but then commercial fished. I commercial fished like for 35 years. And at the same time, I did block work and cement finishing and stuff, you know. But it's been quite a road, you know.
I think that lodge is just amazing.
Yeah, I think it's pretty cool, you know. We had to learn real quick that you never build a half a lodge and it's going to stand. So it started to lean on us, you know, so I told them that's where they started putting cables on it, you know, because usually you build a full one, you know, but I think kids will enjoy being in there, you know. They got,
Do you think they will have you talking about
well,
it?
I don't know. I don't know how that's going to, you know, I live so far away too, you know.
How important is it to have a museum like this that is?
I think it's important in any nationality to have their beginnings and progressing all the way up. I think that's very important. And that makes them proud of their heritage too in that way, in a materialistic way, you know. And I think it's important, you know. That way, if it's done right, people don't get confused when they look at something done put you know, half-ass, you know. But I think it's important to do things right, you know. And
to learn about it.
and to learn about it, you know. And that's how you learn to do it right, is you start doing it. You know, just like when I do classes, you know. And I invite both non-Indian and Indian in my classes, and I think that's a good thing to do. Then we start talking about, their culture does something else. I even took on some of that stuff, you know. But I think it's important. And as you're doing this, you're talking. You're getting to know people. I still get letters or phone calls of people I worked 30 years ago with, you know. And but I think it's good for everybody to learn, you know. You don't actually have to do it, but use your common sense and figure it out, you know. That's why I swear to God that's what they should have in school, the class in common sense, you know. Trouble is the teacher doing it sometimes don't have no common sense, you know. But I think people are getting a little better now, you know,
What?
and realizing each other's cultures, and you know, and I think most people in the United States are mixed blood, you know, and I think that's good, you know, and but you know, I'm proud of my heritage, you know, but that's just a heritage thought. I'm proud that I straightened myself up and done some good, you know. And I got married. The first time I got married, I had a child. I only had one, and she passed away.
Sorry.
But then I married this idiot, and that lasted for about 7 years, too long, you know. And now I'm married to Molly, so altogether I've been married over 50 years. You know, so, and I think marriages are important if they're not discriminated against. I'm not going to marry you because you're black or white, or, you know. And I think that's good, you know. And my wife is like almost strict Irish, you know. And I got.
So what do you hope for kids who maybe don't really have a good idea of who they are? What do you wish for them that they could
I wish they could find somebody that could teach them, you know. That's why you got to teach, a lot of times in this case, you got to teach the grown-ups before you can teach the children, you know. Because I'm the one that taught my son a lot of it, you know, and my wife too, you know. They got, but that you got to teach the grown-ups first in this day and age, you know. They got, but I look at everything, every time that I think I can do some good, I'll do it, you know. And a lot of times I keep my mouth shut because it wouldn't do no good, you know. And it'd lead to something else, you know. That, no, it's...
Are you from this area? Are you from Michigan?
No, I'm from Upper St. Ignace, Michigan. It's the first town on the other side of the Mackinac Bridge. It's the Upper Peninsula. I was born and raised there. Yeah.
You're not in a reservation or anything?
No. We got a couple up there, the reservations, you know. Yeah, it's and if you did the history of the reservations, it wasn't for a good thing, you know. I don't know, people, if they got to be taught all the way up and then teach other at that age 2 and up, you know. I'm the person that I know, I don't know everything, Well, almost, no. But I don't know everything. I'd be glad to get knowledge, and no matter what the aspect of it is, I'd be glad to get it.
Do you think knowledge is valuable?
It's very valuable.
What's valuable?
The valuable knowledge is learning, and respecting. And knowledge covers a lot of territory, and but you got to break it down like that, I can give you knowledge on something, but then don't give you the aspect of it. When I leave, you're going to say, "What the hell did he say?" It's the teaching part of it, That, but
How does it make you feel to teach classes?
I feel all right by it, yeah. And like I said, when I done the book, I did a lot of lecturing in museums, or not museums, but colleges and universities, and yeah, that was quite a deal. There's where I learned that people didn't know too much. Not all of them, but there are a lot of them. And why would you hit somebody if they're making fun of you? Duh. Why? Because I hit them because they hit me, for Christ's sake. Not in more than one way. They hit me physically and mentally. Why? That.
It looks like you have found a way, though, to turn your anger into something.
Oh yeah. Now that I've grown up, but when you're a child, that don't come easy. You got one aspect in your mind is to protect yourself, And it's a darn good thing I got as tough as I was, And especially when I got locked up, And I'll tell you how bad it gets. When I got locked up, I defended myself. I didn't have no lawyer or nothing, so I got locked up for felonious assault without the intent. I go to the parole board. I figured there was 4 idiots after I got done and 1 common sense there. When we got all done, this woman asked me, she says, "Ron, I got to ask you a question. Would you do this again?" I says, "Ma'am, I cannot believe that you're asking me that. I got sentenced not to go to get killed. I got sentenced to do some time and go out, You're damn right I'd do it again. I'm going to protect myself, Who's going to do it for me? I couldn't believe she asked me. And that person's on the parole board. So, of course, I lost my good time, but then I'm alive, good for me, And,
Can you, if I told you a sentence, would you just say it back to me?
What? Yeah, I'll try, yeah.
Like, I think it's good to learn about people's heritage because. Can you say that?
I think it's good to learn the heritage about people because, well, it gives them an understanding of each other in lots of ways, And, like when I was younger, somebody praised me for being an Indian. I said, "What? You're the first one," But no, I think it's very important, And another word that I use a lot, and I think should be in the learning of life, is respect. You got to respect each other, You can't respect yourself if you're a damn idiot, They don't know what respect is. They don't even respect themselves, So they act like an idiot, of course, because they don't understand themselves even, I think respect is, And there's another word that covers this, is love, and kindness. There's so many words that I could put out there that if they were all practiced, we wouldn't have no problem, And I ain't saying you're going to go through life even if you know all that without having problems, because there's always somebody out there who'll give you one,
Do you think that creating your art and your craft can promote kindness and love?
Well, when I started out doing this, it did more good for me because I'm using my hands and I'm thinking, and I got to do both right, or I'm going to get this thing I'm making wrong, you know. Well, I can't make it wrong and then go teach that. I got to do it right, you know. But I think if somebody makes something in my classes and they're, oh my God, they're proud of it, you know, I think that's a good thing, you know. Because most of them, when they start, they say, I never thought I could ever learn this, you know. And some of them didn't, but you don't tell them that, you know. I said it takes practice, and that's what it amounts to most of the time, you know. I mean, I wouldn't even want to sell my first canoe or my first thing that I made. Nobody'd buy it, you know. But, no, I think classes are good if they're done right, you know. And teaching is good if it's done right, you know.
How was the experience of working with somebody like Adam, who's a very active?
Oh, Adam's a jewel. You know, he's, my God, and he's smart. I used to kid around with him. You're really smart because you got tied up with me, you know. No, but he's a quick learner, you know, and he wants to learn. You know, like I said, him and I built several canoes together. But the main thing about all of this is we've become friends, and very good friends. Him and his girlfriend at the time, were in one of my classes, like I said, you know. And we just got to know each other, you know. And but Adam is very smart.
And he's very involved.
Yeah, and he has some. There's a good example. Adam's got an IQ way up there, but he also has got common sense. Which the two of them really go good together, you know. And we've become very good friends, you know.
And he's very interested in Indian and Native
Yeah.
American culture.
They got,
How did that feel to give him what you knew?
oh, good, you know. Anybody, why I did it with him because it was worth doing with him because he was interested. That's a key word, you know. It's just, and I think all of this, if it's done right, you become friends or whatever, but you end up respecting each other, you know, and that's one of my key words. Now, the 10 Commandments are, oh boy, that's a dandy. But you know, and I'm not a religious man. I haven't figured this out, and I'm not going to either. And whoever thinks they got it figured out, don't. I studied the Bible. I did 124 hours of taping on it. I'd read a verse and I'd tell you, this is what I perceived it said. Well, how come I get 10 other people and they don't perceive that's what it says? You don't put a book out like that, you know? And there's only one nationality who did this, and that's the Jews, you know? And I don't mind somebody being religious if they follow the golden rule, you know. And most wars and nasty things were done by religious forms or people, you know. And it's like, you know, I said, I just thought I'd read it for myself. And I couldn't believe this when I was reading it, you know. And I did 124 hours of taping on it, you know. I told my wife, do whatever you want with it after I'm gone, you know. But there's a lot of common sense in there, you know. And there's one thing I'll say, there's no new marriages in the new world like the afterwards. What? What the hell are you going to do with all these kids? You know, that's what God told me that, you know. No new marriages. Well, does that make sense?
No.
You know, but that's one of the things that's in there, you know. And no, I just believe, like, even if it's done it through a religious way, if you become a nice person and give yourself some credit once in a while, you know, you can't be overzealous about bragging about yourself, but give yourself some credit, you know, and that way you form a personality that you could think for yourself, you know, and but
Ron, if thank you so much for this interview and sharing your thoughts. And I just want to know, is there anything about, you know, original people or native culture or native crafts that you haven't talked about that you would like to say?
I think I pretty much covered it. You know, there's probably a lot of things that you can define that means the same thing. It's called repeating yourself, you know. But no, I think I covered it pretty well, you know, and I'm proud of myself when I make something nice. But there is a factor in all this. I made things that I didn't like what it looked like. Well, I cut doing that out. Sometimes I wouldn't put it on the circuit to sell it. And here's why. I started doing it. Because everybody's got a different taste in things, colors, everything, you know. And a lot of the things that I didn't like, I could care for after I did it. It's still, I don't mean it was bad. I just didn't, you know, somebody else bought it. You know, that means they liked it, you know, so we all got different taste, you know, and, but, no, I think I explained it pretty well, you know, and I think a lot of things, though, when you're teaching and when you're being raised, you're raising kids should be repetitious. You shouldn't just tell this kid once about something. Because the first time you tell a young kid, they'll say, huh? You know, so actually they haven't got it yet. So you, a little later, bring it back up again. You know, all the like important things, you know. And teach them to be proud of themselves, heritage and all, you know, and study hard and go to their capacity on things, you know, and so, you know, there's so much involved in everything, you know, if people just look at it, you know.
Are you happy with the role that you have played in teaching?
Oh yeah, I think, you know, I got people that's been with me for 25 years that come back they've been there 25 years with me, you know. And that kind of tells you something, you know. And yeah, it's I think everybody should have really try to get that common sense class in school, you know. Yeah,
I do too.
yeah, I think we need it, you know. But you got to find somebody